So essentially, back in the spring, this all kind of got started because we had a series of school visits from one of the local elementary schools. So Steens Pillar doesn't have a school library, so they have been sending students here to use our library to learn about books and check out books and all that good stuff. That being said, after some of those visits had gone on, I mean, the visits had gone on for a few months, we had a parent who found out that their child had taken something home that they didn't care to have at home. So at that point, this parent reached out to me and we started having a conversation about what's in the kids' collection. You know, there are books on puberty and human development, and we have LGBTQ inclusive topics and books and characters and stuff in there. And so at that point, it just kind of started this conversation about why do we collect those items and how do I avoid those items when I'm in the library or when my children are using the library. So at that point, we moved through some community conversations, some education. I had made a decision at a board meeting that we weren't going to change anything with the materials. We weren't going to label them or put them on a special shelf. So that decision stood for a few months until we kind of had a renewed interest in the subject starting in about October. So in October, we started seeing some more community members come to our board meetings. Raising their concerns about books that they had found, books that are on a list that is circulating through some organizations of these are the books you need to look for and see if they're at your library. So we had folks just kind of come in and start asking us the same questions again. So at that point, we attempted to kind of do the re-education and talk about the decisions that had already been made, but then we really experienced a more significant outpouring of community concern, and we in November probably had close to 100 people attend that board meeting, the majority of which were speaking from the concern point of view, while we had a small minority of folks representing LGBTQ plus community members at that meeting. So at that point, we decided to kind of reach out our feelers a little bit more and make sure we were hearing all the voices. And so now today we are at the point where I have been asked by the library board to create a proposal. And this proposal would essentially set aside all of the materials in our children's collection. It's just focusing on the children's room right now that are fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, anything that would fall under the subject heading in our catalog of LGBTQ. So I've been asked to create this proposal, and as that is something that the library doesn't normally do, we don't pull aside special collections, especially when it's coming from a perspective of we don't like these materials. Libraries can make special collections, but usually it's because it's like, oh, here's all of our books on local history, or here are all of our books on, you know, something that the community has asked for. And so this wasn't an opportunity, or this wasn't a time where like the local queer community had said, hey, make us this shelf. That wasn't what had happened. So we are in a tri-county library partnership with Deschutes Public Library and with the Jefferson County Library in Madras. And basically Deschutes is kind of the contract holder. And we access all of their resources because of this contract. So our patrons can check out books through DPL. They have access to a huge ebook collection through DPL. And since our materials also circulate to DPL, their immediate concern was, well, if you in Crook County are labeling, reshelving, recataloging these materials because your patrons have asked you to, that also then will impact patrons in Deschutes County. They would potentially be receiving items with stickers or different labels or something on them, and Deschutes said, you know, we don't want that. We don't want to have these kinds of stigmatized items or these stigmatized policies really involved with DPL. So if the special collection were to be put forward, the library board of Deschutes Public Library would probably then open an investigation and see what that looks like and see what the impact is. And the big consequence would be that the contract could be canceled. So that means we would lose our circulation software. Our patrons would not have access to the materials offered by Deschutes Public Library. And it would have the very real potential to shut this library down for a period of time while we tried to figure out what to do. So that's kind of like the top level of the consequences and everything and what I've been asked to do. In the past couple of weeks, we've also just had a big outpouring of support from folks who understand that this isn't the way public libraries work. We were able to get a survey out to gather feedback from the LGBTQ community who's not necessarily feeling safe to come to our meetings. So that was a really great way to hear, like, no, this is not something that our community desires. This is not something that helps us feel safe. This, in fact, makes us feel even more discriminated against. And so that's been part of the discussion about consequences, as well as the fact that if you have one group of people making a decision on what other people can access and how they access it, that's just not appropriate. That's not the way to go about things. And then we would potentially be leaving people feeling uncomfortable accessing materials, which is a form of restriction. You know, you don't need to ban a book to make it restricted. All you have to do is stick it somewhere where somebody doesn't feel comfortable visiting, and then you've got a censorship situation. So public libraries really just rely on our best practices, our policies and procedures. So that's also something that really hasn't happened right now. We have a policy called request for reconsideration, where if somebody finds a book they don't like, or they have concerns about where it's located in the library, they can fill out a form and then the library reviews it. We have not received a single formal request for reconsideration for any of these materials. So essentially, creating this special shelf would kind of go around all of our formal policies and procedures, the things that make us a public library and ensure equitable access. Those policies just would not be honored if this shelf were created. So it's kind of this cascading set of consequences of like very real financial, practical consequences to the consequences that our local queer community would experience. And then from there, it's just, are we even allowed to function in the way a public library should? So that's where we are now.